Not even half a year ago, I had one of the freakiest paranormal experiences I've had in a while. To give you some backstory, I live in an apartment attached to a funeral home. I'm a mortuary science student, and I work for this funeral home to get experience while I'm in school to be a mortician. The funeral home happened to have a vacant apartment set privately in the back, which I couldn't possibly turn down as I had moved away from home for this school and needed an inexpensive place to live. Since the day I moved in, I've been having notable paranormal experiences. For a couple of months, I kept them to myself, not wanting to seem like I was feeding into some spooky funeral home stigma or making it up. But eventually, I was experiencing enough that I had to bring it up to a coworker of mine, and she confirmed that she and a few other employees had seen and heard the same things I had. That being said, it's not news to any of us that the place is haunted, if that's what you want to call it. Now, onto my story. Today, after I got home from classes, I was feeling extremely uneasy. My apartment felt extra dark, and I felt sort of jumpy. I was standing in my bathroom braiding my hair when one of my coworkers texted me. She said she had a weird feeling and asked me to go check the front doors of the funeral home to make sure they were locked. I read her text as I braided my hair, and her next message popped up. I'm 99% sure I locked it, but I have a nagging feeling about something. I told her I'd go check. I finished braiding my hair, slipped on my shoes, and walked to the door in my apartment that opens up into the back of the funeral home. The lights were off, and I didn't bother turning them on, as the motion sensors in the hallway always kick on by themselves. I made my way to the front lobby, which was dark, not counting the lights through the front door windows. I walked to the front doors and pushed. Sure enough, both were unlocked. At that moment, I had a really heavy feeling, like someone was behind me or watching me. I kept turning around to look, but standing by the light at the doors and looking into the dark lobby made it almost impossible to see. I hurried up, locked the doors, and made my way back through the lobby. As I was about to enter the hallway, I heard a little girl giggling. I stopped dead in my tracks for a moment. Just at the end of her giggling, it sounded like it was coming from behind the door, not 6 feet away from me. I got chills on my entire body and hightailed it back into the lit hallway and into my doorway. I locked the door behind me and immediately heard a loud bang from a room in the funeral home. I have no idea what it was, but it was loud, and I'm not about to go and check. As I was standing there, shaking in my shoes, I texted my coworker back saying the doors were both unlocked. As I'm typing her my story of what happened, she says, "I don't know, man. I've been getting weird vibes in there all day." I think maybe it's safe to say the spirits in here are extra active today. It had been a few weeks since I've had anything too strange happen, but now I'm extremely on edge. There are two spirits that myself as well as 3 other coworkers have all seen. One is of a little girl. She looks maybe 8 years old. She's slightly taller than average, and she shows herself so briefly you wonder if you ever saw it. I would almost say she looks 10, but when we hear her giggle, she sounds like a young girl of maybe 6 years old. The other is a tall, shadow-like man who wears a long black coat and a black hat. He has an entirely different story, though. I'm chilled right now. Some days here feel weirder than others, and tonight feels like one where I probably won't get any sleep. I feel so anxious right now. Usually these things happen in waves, so I feel like I'm just waiting for the next thing to happen. Before we move on to the next story, have you ever experienced such a scary? Please let me know in comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. When I started my new job at the first location, I also joined a gym just a block away from the funeral home. The town layout allowed me to see the funeral home from the gym window. After my workout sets, I often found myself staring at the funeral home. One particular evening, after picking up a decedent and embalming around midday, I was sitting in front of the gym, looking out onto the street. I noticed the attic light was on. There's a window leading into the attic, which allowed me to see the light. I called my manager to ask why the light was on since neither of us had been up there that day. I knew he wasn't there, and I certainly wasn't. We both shrugged it off after the call ended, but my attention returned to the light. I watched as it turned off almost perfectly, as if someone had heard me talking about it. It's worth noting that only my manager and I ever go up there, and the only other person there at the time was the decedent we had picked up that day. She had been embalmed during the workday, so there was no possibility of her waking up or anything like that. At the second location, there were times when I lay in bed at night in the apartment above the funeral home and could have sworn I heard a crowd of people downstairs, as if a full-blown visitation was underway. The issue was, there wasn't any visitation scheduled because, if there had been, I would have been working it. Before we move on to the next story, have you ever experienced such a scary? Please let me know in comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. There are many options in Atchison for funeral homes, so almost everyone in town has been to all of them at some point in their lives for a service. I remember as a child sitting on a chair in the lobby of one of the more prominent funeral homes, bored out of my mind during a visitation. It was for a distant relative. A kid I knew from school walked up and said hi. We started to chat when something caught my eye. Far down the hallway, going into the closed-off area of the funeral home, I saw the hands of an old man come around the corner and grasp onto the wall. Slowly, the old man peeked his head around the corner and just stared blankly down the hallway into the visitation room. Thoroughly weirded out, I looked over at my friend who was staring down the hall. He turned to me and said, "What is he doing?" When we looked back, the man was gone. We didn't even talk about it again until around 20 years later, when I got a call from my old friend out of the blue. He said, "This is gonna sound crazy, but do you remember that old man from the funeral home?" I was a little hazy on it, but I did remember. He continued on to say, "Well, I was just there, and my daughter saw him during the viewing for my Uncle Bill. She came over and asked my wife why the creepy man down the hallway was staring around the corner at Uncle Bill. There wasn't anyone there, man." I could hear the fear in his voice, and I instantly got chills. I've been back to that funeral home many times now, and I've not seen anything else, but I still get uneasy to this day anytime I walk past that hallway. If you found these stories chilling, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more gripping tales. Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.